In this part of the film now, the little gang has gone to Cairo to avoid the German authorities. Now the action has moved on board a ship in the harbor of Cairo, which also is a casino, where these characters spend their time socializing and probably killing the boredom. Notice also that from here on in the film, from the beginning of this Act 7 and all through the whole act and all through Act 8, backgrounds look like they're in complete darkness. And this is no accident. I think this is completely intentional because it matches the content of the script and what's going on the screen. And by this I mean specifically it matches the moral decline that's going on simultaneously in the film. But it also symbolizes the increasing severity of the problems these characters are trying to escape from. This part of the film is, I think, a really perfect metaphor for drug addiction. It really seems like a dramatization of someone that's both trying to escape their problems by using more and more drugs, but they're getting less and less high off of it. But now the drugs themselves are causing them more pain also. Okay, it seems to me from this, especially in this part of the film, or from this section of the film on, that the difference here between the opening scenes, or the first half, is that from the beginning of the film, it seemed like all the characters were wearing masks, and you had to figure out who the predators were. In this part of the film, it's all out in the open. Everyone, you can see immediately who has the most predatory natures. And now nothing is hidden when you're watching this collection of animals. This collection of hang-arounds, especially the little sleazeball with the mustache, reminds me of the kind of people that surrounded Mike Tyson in the early 90s. The only two I really feel sorry for are Alva and the Countess, because I think they really love Lulu, and both of them are dragged deeper and deeper into the chaos of her life. It is odd, though, that they're also best friends. It's kind of a weird love triangle, but I have seen stranger things happen in real life. Obviously, the Countess really loves Lulu because she gives her her own passport at the end of the previous act. If you look closely in the scene in part 6 when it's shown on the train, the name inside it is Augusta Geschwitz, the Countess's real name. So what I'm assuming she did is she gave Lulu her passport and then she got another one so she could travel and then to join them later on. Because of her and Alva are best friends, he would tell her where they went if she had to wait, let's say, a month to get another passport. Anyway, this part of the film reminds me a little bit of something like The Jersey Shore or one of those scripted reality shows with a lot of bored early 20-somethings all clustered together. Drama and alcohol-fueled craziness, or alcohol and drug-fueled craziness. From the bad judgment, the results of the bad judgment that it causes. I remember being Lulu's age and wanting to party just like her. I think this is actually pretty realistic in that sense. But here in this group, here's really where their little entourage, that things are starting to come off the rails, and boredom and frustration to lead to desperation once circumstances force these characters to start making mistakes. And the part where we'll say all the motivations of what I'll call these satellite characters are no longer hidden. Again, as I said, that a lot of these characters really remind me of people like Don King and the other users and manipulators that always seem to surround celebrities and use them and just get everything they can. These parts of the film are almost like watching an old black and white newsreel of someone's pockets being picked in slow motion, or even of a body being dumped in a back alley after it's been used for sexual gratification. All these characters, they seem to get greasier and greasier as the film goes on. This part of the film really points out the real downside of how we idolize the possibility of becoming rich or famous, but in actuality, I think it would actually really suck because everybody wants something from you, and especially if it means you have to be surrounded by these lounge lizards and these fake plastic people 24/7. And Louise actually did say in her biography that when she wasn't a famous actress anymore, that the only people that were interested in her were men who wanted to have sex with Lulu. Part of the film also, it seems like, where the little pimp becomes the puppet master of this whole group. So almost orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. And we see Rodrigo Quast's true character by the end of Act 7. I think we see when Quast's character is truly revealed, perhaps why him and the little pimp are such good friends. They're both pieces of... Note also that when they show some of these scenes inside the casino, the room seems so dark that it's often hard to see all the characters' faces, that some of them are covered by shadows. And the darkness in the backgrounds in a lot of these scenes really, really becomes apparent, especially in the moments when the drama is at its highest. And I don't think this is an accident. I think Pabst or the cinematographer planned this on purpose, and it's very, very effective. Pabst himself seems like almost a control freak, the way he would micromanage even down to the minutest detail, so the actors' actions in each of these scenes. So this tells me there's nothing in this film that's accidental. Everything has been planned to the finest detail. But the blackness in the backgrounds in this act is different from the previous parts of the film, and I think in the way of how it influences the mood, it's much more oppressive than any darkness we've seen in the background in previous sections of the film. It does also add a general sense of doom, like people sitting around waiting for their execution, or maybe even an episode of Survivor. The general sense of doom. It almost reminds me of something like a depression that's so dark and so heavy that you can feel, or how certain people seem to walk around carrying a heavy weight on their shoulders, even though it may be unknown to them. I think the dual purpose of having this blackness in the background is it both shows the lack of morality involved in all these characters' actions, and the depression, I think, that one of the main characters secretly carries around with them. If you can't by chance figure out which characters I'm referring to, I will reveal that in the last part, at the very end of the commentary, because now if I gave away who it was, it would reveal it something that can't be understood until seeing the very end of the film. Now, for those of you wondering how long it might take for someone to, like Alva will say, to gamble away his father's fortune, this film proves it's not long. Now here I think the very last person on earth that Alva should be taking advice from is this little pimp. After seeing the wad of money that the Countess gives to Lulu, Quast now threatens to turn Lulu in if he doesn't get his 20,000 francs, that seeing as they're already at a loss because they have to pay the local police commissioner 300 to keep quiet about Lulu and not contact the German police, this puts them in quite a bit of a crisis. Now, I think this particular act of the film works out almost perfectly, and this is strictly only from a dramatic or narrative point of view. I'm not talking about the tragic effects on these characters, but of the good choices in the casting. Because of the casting, how well all these actors play their roles, especially the casting of Louise Brooks. Pabst chose her partly for her style of acting, but I think the other reason he chose Louise Brooks is, as you see in this section of the film, because she has a slightly different hairstyle than she has in the rest of the film, so no hair is hanging in front of her face, and you see how absolutely incredibly beautiful her face was, and she was so beautiful that she was the kind of woman that I think people would do anything for her if they loved her. And this again makes this really, really believable, because all the hell that certain ones of these characters go through because they're so maybe enslaved by her beauty that they will do anything for her. Again, because Louise Brooks is so beautiful, this is believable. And the only other woman I can think of that has this kind of beauty is Alison Goldfrapp, because her eyes her voice and her face are all so incredibly beautiful. But that combined with not just the beauty of her voice, but the way she sings makes her so beautiful that I think a lot of people would do anything she asked them to do. If she wanted to become a manipulator, or maybe it's just that I love her as much as the Countess loves Lulu. It's also, I think, slightly interesting that in this act of the film, most of the action takes place inside a casino that also is a bar. And Louise Brooks seems to look really at home, and I think that's no accident, because I read that she herself was a really heavy drinker from the age of 14 until she was in her late 40s. I think this section of the film also really well illustrates how often in life lots of us can seem to escape from one trap only to get caught in a much worse one that we can't escape from, or suggests the lives of people who their entire life seems to be them going from one crisis to another and always somehow escaping even though they shouldn't, until maybe the very end or close to the end, when they unexpectedly get caught in a trap and then think they will escape just like all the other times, only to have it close on them, and they this time they get crushed. Especially at the end of this Act 7. I'm happy to see the departure of Rodrigo Quast. The more of him I see in this film, the less and less I like him. And it starts to become apparent, I think, when at the beginning of the film I didn't see why him and the little pimp are friends, are such inseparable friends. But by this point in the film, I see why him and the little pimp are such inseparable friends. And there's an old expression that says, one fisherman knows another. And I think that might be the case here, that people like to associate with others who are like themselves. For example, alcoholics want to be around other alcoholics, and that maybe explains this collection. Again, as I've said before in the other parts of this commentary, that here the casting of Louise Brooks is perfect in this film, because her beauty is almost like a drug that gets people addicted. And it also, her beautiful, beautiful face helps to obscure the fact that, like most of the other characters in this film, her morality is based on personal preferences, and that is that she does what's best for her. But because she can hypnotize us with her beauty, you notice it a little bit less when you watch in most of the parts of the film. In certain parts, it's emphasized. Lulu has learned how to use her incredibly beautiful face to entice and manipulate people. Even though there's no drugs shown in any scenes of this film, only alcohol, the movie does really remind me of watching a group of addicts, or the behavior of drug addicts, who eventually sacrifice everything in their life just to feed their addiction. From at least Act 4 on in this film, the collateral damage has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, as happy as I am to see the downfall and removal of the character of Rodrigo Quast, it does come at a terrible price. And this is, again, I think, one of the really tragic parts of the film, because the Countess, her life is basically destroyed. I think her and Alva, I'm going to say, are the two characters in this entire film that their morality is the least suspect. They both basically get sucked into doing some things they maybe shouldn't do because of their love for Lulu. And her especially. She's, I think, the most innocent character, and again, her life gets destroyed. Now, the really ominous suggestion in this film about the removal of the Countess is that she was the one that kept bailing Lulu out and saved her from at least 2 previous bad circumstances. So with her gone, I think the worry is now there's no one to save her anymore. The other reason I think I have a little more both sympathy and maybe respect for both Alva and the Countess is that what happens to them, it reminds me a little bit of the scene in the film The Green Mile, in which Big John Coffey describes how people can use someone's love for another to make them into a victim. And I think that's in essence what happens to both of them.